Welcome to the Floor Academy podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hedin, owner of Illustrious Hardwoods in Phoenix, Arizona. We are here to get you to stop playing contractor and running a successful and profitable business. This week, I have Fred Hueston with me, who is a longtime member of this industry and was originally a guy working in a lab doing scientific stuff, and his mom asked him if he could fix some staining and tile, I believe, in her house. And he was like, yeah, I know how. I'll figure it out, Mom. And got sucked into the flooring world, which was inevitable because his dad was a mason. So it was only a matter of time before the lab coat came off and he was coming home looking dirty. But
exactly.
I got a couple of things to do first before we really jump into this, and I have Fred introduce himself. So first, I would like to say that the Floor Academy podcast is sponsored by Tralama, the trade labor marketplace where businesses can find skilled trade labor, such as flooring installers, and where flooring installers and other skilled tradespeople can find permanent or project work. You can set up your profile at tralama.com. That's TRALAMA.com, or download the app from the Apple App Store or Google Play. And remember, Tralama is always free for skilled tradespeople. Okay, Fred, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
You've had some things change. You're on the opposite coast now, not permanently, just for a little bit.
That's correct.
I think by the time this probably airs, you may be going back the other way. So we'll find you in Florida again. But let's hear your story. Give us a little bit of background for people who don't know who you are, what you do, why you do it.
Okay, I'll try to make this the short version. I know a year and a half ago we did a podcast, and I think I took half the show introducing what I do, but I'll make it a lot shorter today. Basically, as you said, I started out in the business as a kid. My dad was a setter, and I vowed that I would never get into this business. I didn't like mixing mud. I didn't like getting my hands dirty, so I was going to go to college and become a marine biologist. So I went to college, graduated. I ended up working for the University of Florida as in a lab, doing some research, some interesting research, nothing to do with stone or tile. And my mom had an issue with some stone. She called me. She said, "What do I do?" And I said, basically, "I don't know. I'll find out." And I was just flabbergasted at how little was known. Now we're talking, just to give you a little bit of give away my age here. That was probably 40 years ago. So I'm in retirement age now, but I'm not retired, and we could talk about that a little bit later.
We're made to work. We're made to work.
Yes. So I ended up, make a long story short, I ended up with a contracting company, started out as a restoration contractor, restoring marble and granite, ended up working into a fabrication shop. I was partners in a fabrication shop in Asheville, North Carolina for a while. And then I started a training center, training other craftspeople because I found a need in our industry. There was no really formal training, or what I like to call unbiased training, where, I'm not trying to sell equipment. I'm just selling knowledge. And because of that, I ended up in the consulting industry. And we can get into that story if you'd like. I've got a couple interesting stories of how that happened. And from the consulting industry, working with insurance companies, other contractors, architects, engineers. I was involved in several casinos in Las Vegas, overseeing their installation a number of years ago, and ended up falling into what we call the expert witness category. And at the time, I had no idea what an expert witness is. So to sum up, basically what I do today is I do training a couple times a year. And the other times of the year, I'm doing consulting work, inspections, and expert witness work.
Okay. I'm going to apologize to the audience if the audio wasn't coming through. We should be good on my local side. I'm sorry, Fred. I forgot to uncheck a box.
That's okay.
If anything, we'll record an intro a little bit later, and we'll see what happens. So,
Sure.
Sorry, buddy, man. I'm telling you, this video stuff. There's too many things going on now that I switched to video, and I'm gonna get the bugs worked out. So, all right, you've moved in. You gained some knowledge. You've moved. You were doing big things. You worked for some big companies, and you had that restoration business. You got into doing inspections and stuff, and then you were doing the expert. Now you're doing a lot of the expert witness stuff, and that's that's what we're going to focus on today. And so I've heard you talk about it. I've heard Paul Lucia talk about it. I've heard some other inspectors talk about how they get some court cases here and there. It's definitely appealing in that I always like talking about finding ways to get off your knees. Everyone thinks they're going to have to install until they die. And there's so many other options out there. And I'm working my way through interviewing people that have found many other ways to do things. And so this is quite the lucrative way to do it if you can find the way to write stories up properly, find the way to... Everything has to be worded properly, right? Like, we can't say what we want. It's all non-biased, factually based, and it's a different way of thinking, it seems, when you look at things and then talk about what's going on.
That's true. And what's the knowledge I've gained in expert witnessing, I want everyone to know that maybe listening to this doesn't just apply to my knowledge as an expert in my field. So in other words, I'm an expert in stone and tile, but it'll apply to anyone. I mean, I can teach a doctor how to be an expert witness. I'm not going to teach them how to do heart surgery, obviously, but I can teach them what it takes to be an expert witness from the logistics side of it, how to deal with an attorney, how to write a report, some of the things that are included, some of the legal terms, et cetera, et cetera. And you're correct. It's a very lucrative field. I wish I would have known this years ago, but then years ago, I didn't have the experience that I have today. But we could talk a little bit about, if you want, what qualifies you to be an expert.
Yeah.
But maybe that's a good place to start.
I think that's a perfect place to start. I want to know, because look, I've been doing flooring 6 years. I mostly do a lot of luxury vinyl plank. And while I can go and identify some problems, and I've been called out by potential clients to look at floors and they're cupping or they're doing this, and okay, if it's cupping, it's, and there's not a chair with wheels on it around, most likely there's probably not a vapor barrier underneath it, because we're a lot of concrete out here, and I see a lot of installs that just get thrown down right over the concrete. But there's plenty of other reasons stuff like that can happen too. And so I don't feel I would be experienced enough, wise enough to do it. And so besides, maybe there's not like a set years of experience. Is there like a base range? Should I go and get certifications from not only inspector schools, but installation certifications? Like, what do I really need to even start getting into this?
You're partially right. Having 6 years of experience and with the work that you particularly do, you would qualify as an expert. And let me go back and explain how a court, and let me just clarify this and put a disclaimer up front. I'm not an attorney, so I can't give legal advice, but I can tell you from an expert standpoint what I've experienced, and that is, of all the court cases I've been involved with where people are getting sued, I've been against experts that have very, very little experience. And the way the court looks at it is they look at you as you having a special knowledge. If you have a special knowledge, it's a special skill. So you could be a contractor for 2 years and still qualify to be an expert. All those other things we talked about, all the certifications, all the training, that just adds to it. So one of the things we do as an expert is we do research. I mean, I've been in this business over 40 years now. I don't know everything. I go into, we've got new materials coming out that I see that I haven't seen before. So when I go and I look at a project, I have a set of checklists, if you will, of what to look for. And then I go back and I do my research. And at that point, then you write a report or you talk to the attorney or whoever your client is at that particular point in time. So, as far as qualifications go, I would say, have a little bit of experience. A couple of years experience is probably enough to start with. And then after that, it becomes a matter of researching, knowing where to look, looking at the standards, the guidelines, having confidence in what you're talking about. And that's one thing I'll sidetrack a little bit that really scared me in the very beginning of doing this work, is I was like, God, I'm dealing with all these really smart attorneys, and these guys have got years of experience and years of education. They're just going to bury me. And I discovered one thing is that I have the upper hand, and so would you, because they don't know your business. You're the expert. They know the law. You don't know the law, although you do learn a lot about the law if you've done it as long as I have. But you have the experience. You're basically, I hate to use the word expert witness. What I consider myself more than an expert witness is what I call a teacher. because that's what you're doing when you're hired for a court case. You're teaching maybe the judge, you're teaching the attorney, you're possibly teaching a jury, which is rare to actually go to court. But when you do a deposition or an arbitration, you're teaching. You're going in, you're doing your inspection, and you're basically, telling them what's wrong. You're really not pointing fingers that a lot of people say, and that's one of the things that I strive on. Is you're going in there as a technical guy. You're going in there to say the floor is cupping. This is the many reasons that the floors could be cupping, and here's what I found may be the solution. So knowledge, confidence, your time. Obviously, I spent probably more time doing research and more time writing reports than I actually do doing the inspection.
Okay.
Example of that, I was down in Portland, Oregon, looking at a porcelain shower the other day. I probably was in there 30 minutes, maybe an hour. I spent all day yesterday researching and constructing the report. So that's where your time is. You need patience. You obviously need to be able to communicate in an effective manner, and you have to remain calm. Everybody's watched those Perry Mason movies or L.A. Law or whatever those old shows were, or I want a yes or no answer and blah 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 blah, and that doesn't apply to an expert. As a matter of fact, when it comes to yes or no answers, I have a canned response. If I'm asked a question that I don't know a yes or no answer to, I will look at the judge, I will look at the attorney or whoever I'm talking to, and I'll basically say, that can't be answered with a yes or no. Can I explain? Well, by answering the question and then say, can I explain? Someone's going to say, no, that's okay. I don't want you to explain. They're going to say, yes, explain. And you can explain why there isn't a yes or no answer to that. So as far as qualifications go, being in business, getting as much education as you possibly can, not only in your field, whatever that field is, but also a little bit of education in becoming an expert as well.
Okay. So is this something that I would want to... I'm trying to grow an installation company right now. That's what I really want. I want to turn it into a retail shop. I want to have some crew, some salespeople. That's the goal right now. And so is this something that I would want to look at into getting into towards the tail end of a career, or once systems and processes are in place? If you're spending time having to go out, look at things, write up reports, if something did have to go to arbitration, or you actually had to take it to court and there's a jury, if I've got installs scheduled, I can't go be an expert witness in court and to call all my clients and be like, sorry, I gotta go sit in court 8 hours a day now. Right. So how would you use this to fit in? Is this transferring into a new career, or what are we doing with it?
Yeah, there's several things. First of all, you have individuals my age and even younger than me that are looking to retire. They're looking to get out of the business. They're tired of being on their knees. They have bad backs. They have bad knees. We all get in the flooring industry, regardless of the type of flooring that we're dealing with. You have other individuals that become injured. I'm assuming a lot of the people listening to this podcast are probably self-employed. And I would be willing to bet if I took a poll, none of them have any plans for a nest egg for retirement. I'm going to work till the day I die sort of attitude. And, this is something that can be put on the back burner. Say, what if I get injured? What if I hurt my back? What if I blow my knees out and I can't get replacement knees and can no longer do any flooring or whatever? That's something you may want to look at. Although you do have an issue with what you're doing or what any other contractor is doing, and that is something we call a possible conflict of interest. And there are ways of doing that. So if you're doing, say, wood flooring like you do, and someone calls you in and says, I've got this cupping problem on my wood floor, what an attorney is going to do, if you're called in as an expert and you have a flooring company, they're going to say, well, Kyle, you just want to take this floor out and put a new floor in, don't you? So, the way around that is to separate yourself from the contractor standpoint of it. And I've had some individuals even start separate companies. Here's my inspection company and here's my, flooring company or whatever contracting company you have. So it's something that, if you're not ready for it right away, it's going to be helpful, because you could get into a situation where you're injured, the economy goes into crapper like it did a number of years ago, and you want a way to supplement your income if you need to do that. If you've got a thriving business, there really is no need, to be honest. but it's good knowledge to have anyway.
I mean, I can see that. I just obviously the podcast exists to educate people, and I've learned that education is important. The more you have, the better off you are. And so
Right.
I can see how, if I can identify what causes the problems, if I'm going out and looking at things, then that would make me a better installer now, because I know how to prevent those problems going into it. And it's not always as simple as just following the instructions.
Right.
There's things that are unseen and unknown. I mean, I don't remember if I heard you talk about it on your show or in another interview, but you were talking about how you used to have to do destructive testing to find if people were doing like spot bonding.
Yep.
And then you learned you could just heat up the wall with the sprayer with hot water, and then get out your like a FLIR camera or whatever.
Yep.
And you could just see where there was thin
Exactly.
set bonded. And
Exactly.
it's like little things like that, right? Like, that's not in manufacturer instructions. That's not in no one's going to teach you that unless I
No.
go and I talk to you and I hear the story.
Right. Exactly.
But it
And
makes the job easier. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, it makes the job a lot easier. And it's. Yeah, I always say it just really has nothing to do with expert witnessing, but and I know that's what we're talking about. But a lot of times when I show up on a job, if a contractor's there, they don't want to see someone like me. They don't want to see an inspector.
Mhm.
But put yourself in their shoes. If you're doing the job properly and you're following industry specifications and industry guidelines, you have nothing to worry about. And that's just the way I look at it.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I think if you're trying to hit, dot all your I's, cross all your T's, generally speaking, you should end up in a position where you especially if there's documentation. Documentation is everything,
Yep.
just like it is
Absolutely.
on this expert witness side, right? Like, everything's gonna have
Right.
to get written up, shown. Here's the picture of this. Here's why it doesn't work. Here's the book that says it doesn't work. If you're not documenting it, even though you're crossing your I's and dotting your T's, you're not doing yourself any favors. Pictures are going to go a very long way.
And it's funny you should say that, because one of the things that I teach experts is that with documentation is very important, but you got to be really careful with documentation, because in law, there's something in court cases, I should say, there is something called discovery, which basically, when you're hired as an expert, you no longer have that attorney-client privilege that you would have if you were suing someone. For example, if you were suing, if someone were suing you, Kyle, for a poor installation for whatever, you can go to your attorney and you can talk to your attorney about anything you want, and the other side may never hear that conversation or want that conversation.
Yeah.
As an expert, you don't have that privilege. Everything you say, everything you write down, everything you do becomes discoverable, including emails. So very carefully, I know a lot of attorneys will ask you to write a draft report and then read it to them over the telephone. Telephone messages aren't recorded. So
Okay.
it becomes really careful. So what I'm getting to is, one of the things I do, and you had mentioned photographs, is during my inspections, you'll never see me taking notes, ever, on any inspection. My notes become my camera. And, then I can put a ruler in front of a crack, for example. I can take a picture of it, and that will key in my mind, where that crack is, where that location is. And the reason being is this, a number of years ago, an attorney taught me this, is I happen to doodle a lot when I take notes. When I was in college, I'd have little drawings all over the place. And
Yeah.
I had a deposition one time. I handed my notes over to an attorney, and he was saying, "Well, who's that a picture of? Is that a picture of my client? Are you trying to make fun of my client?" And, just every little mark I made, every little, what's that star there for? What's that check mark there for? So if you make no notes, other than your photographs, you won't get into that particular situation.
So you have to hand over the photographs, but the photographs don't mean anything to anybody but you.
Exactly. They'll ask you, explain this photograph. What does this mean? Whatever. So it's just, protecting yourself. And those are the type of things you learn, being an expert over the years.
Well, I mean, you just saved me, 10 years of making mistakes.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's why these things are powerful. It's, you can just the conversations we can have to not only learn about other places to go in the industry, but the fact that there are folks like you who have been there and done that, and you're willing to share your knowledge and skill with us. It makes the learning curve for the next generation so much easier and faster, and you can get them you can get them up to speed quicker. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be on the same level, but you can take places where we're going to fault and trip along the way and get them out of there, which is nice.
I'm a firm believer in learning from someone else's mistake. Not that I'm not going to make mistakes. I still do to this day. But if you can learn from somebody else's mistake, even better. Just one little tip like I just gave there can save you a lot of headache in the long run. So definitely very important. Okay. And it's a sharing industry. Years ago when I started, it wasn't a sharing industry. I mean, everybody, it was like keeping the formula for Coca-Cola, how to install, how to restore, whatever. Today it's different.
I hope so. I mean, I see a lot of it both ways still, to be honest, just being involved in the groups on Facebook and talking to other people. There's people that are willing to share everything, and there's people that keep it locked up tight. And the only thing I can say is look at the state of the industry and how many people you think are unqualified individuals for labor in it. And if we go with this, like, go figure it out on your own thing, it makes a lot of sense why the industry is currently the way it is to me.
It's funny. I had this conversation the other day. I don't know if, excuse me, if you followed that video that's been all over the news and all over the forums where the guy goes in with a sledgehammer and tears out his. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
And that just gives a bad name to the installation industry in general. And and the conversation I had with some installers the other day was just that. How do we get qualified installers? How do we go get them out there to get certified or whatever? And you can do that, but the problem is there's so many out there that are just, and I'll go ahead and use the word hacks. They're like in my state of Florida, there's no licensing required. It's basically raise your right hand. Here's a grout float and a pickup truck. You're a tile setter.
Yes.
In other states, it's not that way. But even in states that have very strong licensing, I still see failures.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a ton of them out there, it's bad for the industry. It's bad for the what am I trying to say? The whatever of the industry, the tile setter itself. But it's good in other ways because it keeps me busy.
Yeah. I mean, that's the benefit here, right? I get that there has to be the lower end of the trade in existence. Otherwise, how do you tell high quality work from low quality work? Like there has to be something that separates you. You also, as you said, would not have a job if there wasn't people screwing it up. And Arizona has licensing requirements, but to be honest, there's a place, I don't know, maybe like 6-7 miles from my house, and you pay them a couple grand and they'll help you set up your company. They have like a sister company that'll get you your bond, and you sit in front of a computer and you just kind of start answering the questions. It doesn't matter what license you want. There's a set of questions that are for it, and you cycle through them, and first you just read them, and then it gives you the answer, and then you start trying to guess the answer. And then it'll tell you, if you get it wrong, it tells you the right one. And then you go into the third mode where you just read the question and then you have to select, and it's like the actual test.
Right.
So I figured it'd take me like 2 weeks to get my study up and learn. I was like, man, this is going to be hard. After like 3 days, I was getting 100%. Yep. And once I'm good with like rote memorization, but I was like, all right, well, now I'll make the phone call and go schedule myself at the actual testing facility. And I went and took the test, and I think maybe there was like 2 questions that weren't in my practice bit, and I got what I needed. And it was like, so we're just selling licenses now. Like and especially because I specialize mostly in laminate, LVP, and hardwood. There was more questions about tile installation on the test than anything else for the flooring segment. And I was like, I don't even do it. I don't care. You're not even testing my knowledge. And so it's a very scary thought that even when there's licensing,
yep, exactly.
What does it really mean? Because there's plenty of guys running around licensed that, okay, Arizona's a little bit better in that you have to have a 2-year workmanship warranty on your work instead of a 1 year. But a shower can last 2.5 years before it starts failing in the pan, and really you notice anything. Well, guess what, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner? You're screwed. It's 2.5 years later.
Yeah. I mean, in some states, I've just run into a situation, not to get into too much detail here, but in some situations, if you can prove that the installation was at fault from the get-go, that warranty means nothing. I mean, after the warranty period, and
Yeah.
actually you can be sued and they can go back and sue you 10 years after the fact and still win that case.
And that, I mean, that makes sense. That's only fair.
Right.
I can only assume that I don't think your average homeowner is going to know that and be able to do it.
No.
And if they're not, unless they file a claim with their insurance company, I don't think it's ever going to happen. That, and even for the insurance company, it may not be worth it for them to try and go after this individual, especially because even if they're licensed, if they're doing that poor work, they may not be in business anymore. So how do you find them, track them down? You know, at $7,000 is probably nothing for a large insurance company, and just throw it out there, get these people their shower and move on. But
Exactly.
I'm with you. Like I there definitely needs to be better accountability, but I think stuff like what you're doing can make that happen, because you hear these stories of, oh, I've been doing it the same way for 30 years. It always works. And then it fails. And there you are, you know, having this giant commercial facility that's been built, probably going through arbitration or, you know, maybe going to court over, you know, some kind of lawsuit over showers being put in a hotel or something like that.
So true.
All right. So to get back on track, because we're just, I love talking. I've got experience. I've got knowledge. Where do I go to, besides, like, how do I go to you or someone else and really start turning that into, I'm going to become an expert witness? And then on the other side of that, how do I then go find clients?
Okay, two-part question. The first question would be, you know, take my class. I'm now offering a class that's coming up here via the internet on how to be an expert. And that will focus on all the technicalities of being an expert, from, you know, how to market yourself, legal terms that you're going to need to know, how to take a deposition, how to write a report, regardless of the field you're in. This class will apply to anybody in the construction trades or anybody in any trade for that matter. As far as marketing goes, marketing can be a little tricky with what we do, especially in the flooring industry, because we're, you know, believe it or not, we're a very small industry compared to other industries. Mm-hmm. So people need to find you. How do they find you? How do they know? You know, I've got, you know, let's say I'm an attorney in Phoenix, Arizona, and I need an expert because my client is suing the installer, for an example. Mm-hmm. Where do I find an expert? Well, there's a number of ways to do that. First, there are listing services on the internet, various internet services where you can actually list yourself as an expert. There are legal websites where you can list yourself as an expert. Some are free, some you have to pay for. One of the best ways I found to market, and I think this applies no matter what you do, is obviously your reputation and word of mouth. You know, getting your name out there, mm-hmm. whether it be through writing an article, doing a podcast like this, doing radio shows, you know, any way you can get out there and get yourself exposed. I've had something happen a number of years ago that I never thought would happen, and that is, I was in a case where the opposing attorney was doing a deposition. He was grilling me like no tomorrow. I mean, he was almost borderline nasty to me. Mm-hmm. We got done with the case a year later, and I get a call from that attorney. He wanted to hire me for another case he was doing. So, you know, it's one of those things I tell people in this business: you're going to be attacked, and you just have to realize that's what they do. You know,
that's their job.
It's nothing personal. You know, mm-hmm. They're not going to look at you and say, "Well, you're an ugly son of a gun," or "You're fat," or, you know, they'll attack your qualifications the best they can, and that's okay. That's what they do. You learn to, you know, take it in stride.
Yeah, I mean, well, they're there to try and break up your case of being an expert, right? Like,
exactly.
They were hired to protect their client. That's what they're there to do. Whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. And so the fact that he recognized your skill and said, "Oh, I want this guy on my side this time." Like, you got come with me.
Exactly.
What about going and, like, you know, when I got into this, I cold called like 30 contractors asking for a job. I said, "Hey, you know, these are my qualifications. This is what I want to do. Hire me." 2 of them called me back. Did you go around to like any law offices that specialize in contracting, like lawsuits, and say, "Hey, I'm here. This is what I do. Here's my qualifications"?
I haven't. To be honest with you, that doesn't work very well. Well, let me put it this way. It will work if they have a need for an expert at that particular time,
Hmm.
but you could have a law firm that specializes in construction law, for example. And, they may have cases on roofs, windows, general construction, whatever. And then rarely a case will come up in my field where it's a stone and tile issue. So, by doing that, one of the little tricks I used to use is I would just put a business card in an envelope. And on the business card, I have a Post-it note, and the Post-it note would said, "Bob told me to give you my card," and that's it. So can you imagine if you got a piece of mail like that, and you're racking your head, who the hell is Bob?
Yep.
And you're racking through that. Who do I know? Because attorneys know other attorneys, so
Yeah.
chances are they know someone named Bob or Ted or some common name, and they'll keep your card. And I've gotten work that way. Not a lot of work. I mean, most of my work, believe it or not, nowadays comes through the internet. Having a decent website, having a website with the proper keywords, having the right person to do your search engine optimization. And I would say, today I probably get 75% of my expert work via my website.
Okay. Interesting. I mean, that's good. It makes it a lot easier, right? You just put yourself out in the world, and they come and find you, and that's kind of the best way to do contracting. I mean, word of mouth is always best, but if you can give yourself that giant internet billboard and say, "Hey, here I am, find me," man, no complaints.
No, especially if you're in a field like we are, where there isn't a lot of experts out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's probably I probably know maybe 7 or 8 other experts that do what I do, and most of them are in California.
Okay. And I'm assuming they stay busy. Are they traveling a lot? There's got to be a lot of traveling. Are they mostly in California?
And we run into one another. We cross paths. We end up in the same project a lot of times against each other, which is fine. We can go out and have a beer afterwards and not talk about the case and have other conversations, and that's because that's what we do.
Well, so, okay. What about, I'm going to ask the question. I got to take my headphones off for a second, grab some water, but you just carry on. How many people is too many people? I mean, you're sitting here, you're training people, and there's, like you said, there's some in California, there's you in Florida, but there's not a lot. So even the flooring installation industry is not oversaturated. But how many people can we realistically add to this part of the industry without it becoming watered down?
That was a big question I asked myself when I started offering not only this class on expert witnessing, but also the class on the inspection and troubleshooting. And it's like, am I going to be training my competition? And one of the things I discovered is that a lot of the students that take this class, whether it's the inspection class or the expert witness class, particularly the inspection class, are really not there to become inspectors. They're there to learn more about troubleshooting, what to look for in their work. Becoming an expert does take a special kind of person. We've already mentioned some of those things already. You can't be flabbergasted by the fact that an attorney is pouncing all over you and, attacking your qualifications. If you become very defensive, that's not very good as an expert. You want to try to remain calm and just answer the question as it's asked. But I don't see the inspection business becoming really oversaturated anytime, especially based on what we just talked about with all the hacks that are out there and doing all this crappy work. I couldn't possibly get to every failure that's out there.
Okay. I mean, there's room for growth for sure. And like you said, most people are after that better knowledge, and it can be used down the road. So, I mean, you're not going to make it oversaturated anytime soon. And even people with it, probably it may not end up using it. They have the knowledge, but it's just going to sit there.
And there's, people like me. I mean, I'm in my retirement years right now, and how much longer I got to be on this earth. I hate to say this, someone's going to have to take my place, right? So,
well, correct, but we need you. Yeah. We need you, Fred. Don't talk like that. Not yet.
I don't plan on going out.
Not yet. We need you.
Not yet.
All right. Let me interrupt here for 1 second. What's the hardest part of starting and growing a flooring business? Getting clients. If you're serious about taking your business to the next level, you need a marketing partner like Traffic Digital. Traffic is a full-service marketing agency that works with flooring companies all across the country. They'll help you get a continuous stream of customers using the most modern online marketing techniques. So visit www.trafficdigital.com today to sign up for a free marketing analysis. And don't forget, traffic is with a K. All right. So what are we doing? We've found out we have knowledge. We've learned how to apply it with you. We've gone and built ourselves a website. Where are we taking this next? Like, how do we really start delving into it and building that clientele, building the repertoire of what we would need to perform at a higher level, making sure that we know how to interact with these attorneys and be, like if you're going to go to a deposition, it's going to be recorded. Everything's like, there's no taking it back. Once it comes out, that's it.
It's on the record.
Yeah.
It's on the record. And you have to be very careful there too, because, once you do a deposition, it becomes public knowledge once that case is settled. Mm-hmm. And, a good attorney will go back and look at your prior depositions and say, well, you said this then, how come you're saying this now? So, you have to be extremely careful. And that's some of the things that we talk about. One of the downsides of being an expert witness is the way we're taught as experts and what you learn over the years of how to react in a deposition. You and I like to talk, that's obvious. And people like us sometimes can be a little bit of a disadvantage in a deposition because we want to offer more. Mm-hmm. And it becomes a hazard somewhat. And my wife is always on my case all the time when she asks me a simple question. I'll answer that question as it was asked. A great example of that is standing in line one day. Someone asked me, "Sir, do you know what time it is?" And I looked at my watch and I said, "Yes, I do." Because what was the question? The question was, "Do you know what time it is?" She didn't ask me, "Can I have the time?" So, just be little tiny things like that. It's funny, but it's automatic with me, which is crazy. And let me give you a story. I know I haven't told you before that happened to me many years ago.
That's funny.
This was one of the rare times that I had actually appear in court. And this was a big slip-fall case. Someone slipped and fell on a marble floor in a hotel lobby. And this was a full jury trial, and I get up there on the stand and they, go through the regular, what's your name, what's your qualifications, blah, 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 blah. They go to cross-examine me and the slick attorney gets up there. He must have been in his 30s. He's got the $10,000 suit on, the slick back hair, and he's strutting around the courtroom like he's, some hot attorney. And he throws up a photograph of a lobby floor. Mm-hmm. He says, "No, do you recognize this lobby floor, Mr. Hueston?" I said, "Yes, I do. That's the name of the hotel." And he said, he says, "You went and inspected that floor, didn't you?" "Yes, sir, I did." "And you discovered this, didn't you?" "Yes, I did." "So looking at that photograph and your experience of being there, can you tell me how old that marble floor is?" So I said, "Well, I can't give you the exact age, but I can estimate it." And he said, "Well, go ahead and estimate it." And I said it just like this, without being a smart ass. I said, "Probably anywhere between 15 and 20 million years old." Well, I thought the judge was going to fall out of his chair. I thought the jury had the jury laughing, and it totally blew his case because the question was, how old was this marble? Mm-hmm. He meant to say how old the installation was. That's not what he said. So one of the things I teach is that you have to listen to the question very, very carefully and answer it as it's asked, because if not, you can get yourself in a whole heap of trouble that way.
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense. That's funny. That sucks to be that guy.
I waited years for that question. Finally, it happened in a court of law, not just in a deposition, which is great.
So, I mean, what else besides, we're learning to pay attention to the question. We're answering it very, very specifically to just the question. I'll get myself in trouble with clients because I'll just keep, well, this and that and the other thing. And like, I get too deep. I'm honest to a fault. And then now I've got to create extra, it's not extra work for myself, right? But if I would have been quiet, it's good as is, and it's to spec. But now I've got to go and do it a different way because I had to open my mouth.
And I know exactly where you're coming from, because when I first started doing this, I was that too. I'd go into an inspection, for example, and there'd be the customer there, maybe the customer's attorney, maybe the attorney on the other side, and I'm just, well, this is blah 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 blah, and you got a deflection issue, whatever the case may be, and you don't want to do that on an inspection. The only thing I will usually say on an inspection is I'll ask questions, but I won't respond with answers. Customer may say, "What do you think? What do you think? Is this a crappy installation or what? Do I have a case?" And you basically say, "I don't know. I'm not done with my inspection. I need to take all this data that I've collected. I need to go back to my office, do a little bit of research, and it'll all be in my report." And that's hard to do for guys like you and me.
Yeah.
We want to educate. We want to tell people more. But a perfect example is this inspection I just did out here in Portland. Is like, I says, "Is this going to go to a court case?" "Oh, no, we're not going to go to a court case." Well, I've heard that before. So you have to treat every inspection as if it's going to go to court, and you just have to be careful. That makes sense. You have to be careful. Report writing is extremely important. You kind of hinted on this in the very beginning, and that is, you have to back up everything you say with a guideline, a standard, something to back it up. Otherwise, it just becomes who the heck are you? You're just Kyle. So what? That's just your opinion.
Yeah.
Well, you want to be able to back up that opinion with some kind of documentation. Now, there are some little tricks to that. A great example happens to be where you are in Phoenix, Arizona, and that is with vapor barriers. It's my understanding that vapor barriers aren't very popular in Phoenix, where they're very, very popular out here in Florida. Well, if that's the case, and you have I'd like to call it a geographical exception to the general rule, you can use the term common industry practice. Well, in Phoenix, it's common industry practice not to use a vapor barrier. In Florida, it's common practice to use a vapor barrier. So there are little tricks like that you learn over time, and that's usually up to the lawyer. A lawyer might ask you that question. Well, is that a standard? Is that a guideline? Well, even with guidelines and standards, and this is something that I've been involved with a lot, where I know my industry. I don't know the wood industry or the carpet industry or the other installation industries, but we have, organizations like the Natural Stone Institute, the Tile Council of North America, and they have manuals, they have handbooks, they have guidebooks. They're not standards, they're guidelines. Now, ANSI, which I'm sure you're familiar with, ANSI is a standard. So you have to be very careful when you're quoting a guideline versus a standard, and most attorneys don't even know this. They think because it's in that particular manual that it's a standard. Well, it's not necessarily a standard, it's a guideline. And
interesting.
There's a distinct difference between, and both manuals have it right at the very beginning, that these are guidelines, and I don't remember the exact verbiage. These are only guidelines, it may vary by geographical region, blah, 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 blah. But, but you could still quote them. You just don't mistakenly call them a standard. You call them a guideline.
Got it. No, that makes sense, because I can think to the National Wood Flooring Association, and they do release hardwood floor installation guidelines. And while they are like they are the flooring association, they're the equivalent of the NTCA, right? But for hardwood.
Right, exactly.
But they say, hey, this is what's going to work, and it's a guideline. But you're right. If you want to, like, ANSI's the actual, like, construction, what is it, American
National Standards Institute.
Yeah, and so it's got standards right in the title, and that's going to be the big difference. That's my problem, is like it's the words, right? Like, they matter so much, and you have to be careful about everything you say, everything you write. And so how long did it take you to even develop that skill to make sure that you were, okay, I got to say guideline here because it's a guideline. Yeah. Okay, now I'm doing ANSI, so it's a standard, and this makes that much of a difference. Or, I'm pulling it from the manufacturer's, it's the manufacturer's specifications. And so all these little details, and even in how you word things, you can't ever write the report with, I think. It's da 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 states this guideline or this, standard or whatever it's going to be, and that's why this looks the way it does.
I happen to be one of the guys that learned by doing. I went to the school of hard knocks when I came to this. You know,
Okay.
I just learned through experience. I learned through my mistakes, and you know, I wish there was at the time somewhere where I could go and say, you know, where do I got to be looking for? I knew my field. You know, I knew stone, I knew tile, but I didn't know the expert witness stuff. I just kind of learned over time. I'm still learning to this day. I mean, there's just little things that occur every time, and especially someone like me that works across the whole United States. Different states have different rules and have different laws when it comes to experts. So, you know, I may work in a state that I've never worked in before, and all of a sudden I'm dealing with. Well, I'll give you a great example. When you write a report, there is something called a draft report, and in some states, a draft report is not discoverable. So you can write a report, write draft across it, send it to the attorney, and that's not discoverable. In some states, it's very discoverable. All drafts are discoverable. Well, I don't know all 50 states, you know, so I usually have to ask my attorney. And, you know, and attorneys will guide you. A good attorney, if you're getting ready to do a deposition, will sit down with you and go through a mock deposition, tell you what you're doing wrong. Now, they're not going to change your opinion. They can't do that legally, but they can guide you on, you know, what kind of questions are you going to get, you know, how you want to answer those questions, you know, et cetera. So, you know, don't be afraid if you don't have all this knowledge, because, you know, whatever the attorney is or whoever the attorney is that hires you is going to guide you through that. And if they don't, ask them. You know, I'm a little nervous about this deposition coming up. Can you, you know, give me a little coaching over the phone here of what I'm going to expect? And I've had, I said, I'd have depositions that lasted 15 minutes, and I've had depositions that lasted 2 days. So it just depends, and you never know.
No, I mean, it makes sense. You know, it took me, it's like anything, right? Like I started selling my own projects, and I remember going in and like, I was very nervous and I didn't feel confident in what I was doing. Now, granted, I could talk about the project with a lot of passion, and that sold people early on. Now I can go in and I'm much more comfortable. I'm much more confident. I walk in and I know, like, you called me. I'm the expert. I'm here to do whatever you want, but it's going to be done to X, Y, and Z ways. And it's going to, you know, cost you this much, right? Like I can go in and I can be the salesperson and I can be a confident installer at this point, and it makes a huge difference. And so you're talking about being able to go in and you mentioned earlier, right? Like you have to remember that even though these guys are the lawyers, they called you. Like you're the one with the info on this, and so you're the expert. There's no reason to be intimidated because you're dealing with a court. It just, they need your knowledge, and so that should free you up a little bit, it seems, to be able to go in and present yourself in a much more comfortable manner than being worked up that there's a camera there and they're recording you and they're asking you all these questions. It's like it's just like anybody else asking you these questions, right? It's you're coming on here and I'm doing the same thing to you. I'm grilling you, but it's not in a intimidating way.
Let me give you a perfect example. And I actually told this same story. If you don't mind, I'll repeat it again on the podcast we did a year and a half ago of the example of what you just said, how you know more than the attorney does. And this example is it was a flooring case where I was called to look at a particular, actually I got a phone call first, and the phone call was, you know, we have this floor, it's a travertine floor, it's got some holes and pits in it, and we want to know whether it can be repaired or can be replaced. Well, I don't know if your listeners know anything about travertine, but travertine usually has these holes in them naturally, and they're filled with filler, and occasionally the filler pops out. So very simple fix. You go in there, you put the fill back in, restore the floor, done, it can be repaired. So this particular client asked me to write a letter to such and write out a procedure for repairing it. So I did. And I sent the letter and the repair procedure and everything. And about 6 months goes by and I get another call and they said, Fred, we haven't done this yet, but we're thinking of suing the company that did the cleaning of the floor. Basically, we think they caused the issue. We want you to go out and take a look at this particular floor. So I get on an airplane. It's all the way across the country in San Diego. I get on the floor and I'm waiting for the manager of the department store, which is what it was, to show me where the issue is. And I said, I introduced myself, and I'm here to look at the travertine floor and see what this issue is. And she says, well, you're standing on it. I go, I am. And I look down and it's not travertine. It's what we call an agglomerate floor. Regardless of what, you know what that is, it doesn't matter. So anyway, it comes to deposition, and then I write a report basically stating that it can't be fixed. It needs to be torn out and replaced.
Mm-hmm.
So we get into a deposition, and the attorney starts asking me all these questions, and he gets to the point where, so your opinion is this floor needs to be replaced and not repaired, correct? And I said, yes. He asked me that 10 different ways, which they will do. And he said, well, I want to show you a letter you wrote back in such and such. And he pulls out the letter that I first wrote saying it could be repaired.
Mm-hmm.
And then he pulls out the second letter. He says, well, I have 2 letters here, both from you on the same project stating the opposite. One says it can be repaired. The other says it needs to be replaced. And can you tell me which one of these is correct? And I looked him straight in the eye and I said, yes, they're both 100% accurate. And he had this look on his face like, how the heck can that be? You know, one saying completely opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And so he asked me that, how can that be? And I explained to him there was a difference between travertine and an agglomerate. The attorney had no idea. This guy couldn't probably tell a piece of oak from a piece of stone.
Yeah.
Because he knew the law. All he saw was repair and replace. And that's the type, and that gives you confidence. I mean, that story should give you confidence that you know your particular subject matter. The attorney does
Mm-hmm.
not. So getting back to your very, very first question, even if you have a year's experience, you still have more knowledge about that particular field than that attorney does.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that letter thing becomes interesting because I'm sure there's a way that it could have been played off on that, look, you said this floor can be repaired and now you can't.
Right.
And I think, the way you answered the question is very slick in that they're both accurate. But if I'm sure you wrote the repair this as travertine, do X, Y, and Z. Right. And then you looked at the actual floor and you're like, no, there's nothing we can do. And so that wouldn't have worked because it's not a travertine floor. But I'm wondering if there was language in the original letter as, client has identified to me over the phone, this is a travertine floor and this is how you repair it in that. And so that because you were given misinformation, you're not technically liable if they would have tried the fix because you didn't have the information you needed to give them accurate information.
That's where the wording becomes really important as to, what you put in your report, the type of things and how you explain things. You mentioned one already. You never use words like always or never or I think. Mm-hmm. It's always, based on current blah, blah, blah guidelines, the amount of lippage is supposed to be, less than a 32nd of an inch. And I measured the lippage and it wasn't 32nd of an inch. Therefore, it didn't fit within the guidelines of such and such. Mm-hmm. Another way of saying that would be a wrong way of saying that, I should say, is that the lippage was excessive. And I've seen reports like that, well, what's excessive? Who says it's excessive? Mm-hmm. What is the limit for excessive? And attorneys like to pinpoint you down to certain things. One of the common questions I get all the time is, how much longer do you think this floor will last? And you can even apply it to wood flooring. It's going to last another 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, 50 years. And my question to that is, or answer to that is always, I can't look into the future. It depends on the wear, it depends on the maintenance,
Mm-hmm.
It depends on how it's installed, all those factors go involved. And they'll say, well, would you say 5 to 10 years? And they try to point down to a particular number. And the reason they do that, quite logically, is they're looking at a number so they can settle the case. Mm-hmm. So they're going to, if the floor is going to last another 50 years, it's going to be one number. If it's only going to last another 5 years, it's going to be one number. So
yeah,
unless you know that, which I don't care what you do for a living, I don't know how you can predict how long anything's going to last, regardless of what it is.
Correct.
You got to be very careful.
Yeah. I mean, I've walked in homes and seen, that the current installation isn't done on what would be within flatness tolerances, right? And there's probably transference issues in it, and it's been down a couple years. Joints are okay, everything's staying together. Right. I can tell you it's not to spec, but I can't tell you how long it's going to last. I have no idea. It's still down and looking good, but who knows? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Will you ever have a problem? I'm sure there's plenty of poor installations out there that have lasted a lifetime and never had an issue. And then you get one that's done wrong and it's failing within 3 weeks. So it's crazy.
Yeah, actually, a great example of that is I had a case many, many years ago. It wasn't a legal case. It was just an inspection and consulting job, a floor that failed that was installed in 1868. and didn't fail to 100 years later.
Jeez.
I mean, really
Come
rare. And
on.
there was some, well, I don't want to get into it because it's a long story, but basically what they were doing after 100 years, they were doing some remodeling. And that basically caused a chain of events, which caused the floor to actually pop up.
You changed the environment.
You changed the environment,
yeah.
but it was down for 100 plus years and was fine. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden failed.
I don't even.
Yeah.
That's a waste of time of an inspection, in my opinion. Like, what are you
Yeah.
doing? There's no one to hold accountable. It's screwed up. Fix it.
Exactly.
Oh,
But there's some of these cases are funny. I mean, funny. I mean, I had a case not too long ago where there was a marble floor, and they said, we want you to go take a look at this marble floor. We're going to sue the guy. We want to hire you, and we want you just to go and evaluate it first to see if we do have a case. And, I have a questionnaire that I use, and I give this away in my inspection class. And one of the things I asked is, what is the cost involved here? How much did they pay? And he says, this is over $1 million project. Now, they said project. They didn't say $1 million floor. They said $1 million project. So I have the address, and I'm driving through Tampa, and I'm looking at the address, and the address, I pull up in front of an RV dealership. And I'm like, an RV dealership? It must be I'm thinking the showroom. It's got this marble floor in it. No, it was an RV. It was $1 million RV that had a little tiny floor, and the owner decided he didn't like the RV, and there was something wrong with the floor, so he was suing for his money back on this $1 million RV over a floor that may have cost $1,000. And make a long story short, again, it goes to court, and a judge literally threw these guys out of court. He said, I can't believe you're, in this courtroom wasting my time, wasting all these attorneys' time over $1,000 on $1 million RV. Those are the type of cases you get. You'll get those cases where you have to ask yourself, when somebody's suing somebody, is it going to cost me more in legal fees and expert fees than what the case is worth?
Correct, because now that guy's got to pay he's got to pay his attorney fees, your attorney fees,
right?
Well, the attorney fees that you were representing, plus your time, and sure, he was trying to get $1 million back, but over $1,000.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Sell the RV, man. Sell the RV and get your $500K and move on.
Yep. and you know what people don't realize is that these cases don't happen. You don't get sued on April 1st and settle April 30th. They go on for years. I mean, I've had cases where I'll get a call out of the blue, and they'll go, well, we're ready to take your deposition. And I'll go, who is this? What's the name of this case? And I've totally forgotten about the case. And I have to go back into my records and go, oh, yeah, that was like 4 years ago. Now I got to go back and look at the report I wrote, look at the photographs I wrote to refresh my memory. They go on for a very long time. Anybody that's ever sued anybody or been sued, you know how that works.
Yeah, I guess that's the one part of it, right? Is you make money here and there, but it's not like it's settled in a week or anything, like you said. It could take years to finally get it. I'm assuming you get a bill as your hours go, though. So you're paid for your time. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about like how much you make and why you can bill that amount, and then how you kind of get paid now that you've mentioned, right? Like they called you up 3 years later and you're like, what?
I learned a long time ago that I wasn't charging enough money for what I was doing. You have to remember, if you have so many years experience, you've learned a lot in those short years, long years, or whatever, how many years it is. And your opinion and your knowledge is worth something. And it took me a long time to realize that. So, right now I'm charging anywhere between $250 and $350 per hour for an expert work. I get a minimum of $2,500 for an inspection, whether that takes me an hour or whether that takes me, a day. When I'm with a legal case, I work just like an attorney. So in other words, you hire me as an expert, I require a $2,500 retainer. And it's a non-refundable retainer. So if someone hires me today on Monday and they decide they settle on Tuesday, they want your money back because I haven't done anything. No, I get that $2,500. Now what you do is you bill based on that retainer. So let's say you go do an inspection, you do some research, you write a report or whatever, and you've totaled a total of 11 hours. Well, when you bill them for that month, you bill them for $250. If you're charging $250 per hour, because now that, even though it's 11 hours, 10 of those hours come off that retainer. So you bill on an hourly basis. Just like if you call your attorney and you talk to him for 15 minutes, you're going to get a bill for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
A quarter of that, whatever that fee is. So that's how you bill as an expert, just like you do an attorney. You need to keep accurate records. And some of these cases can really, I mean, I've had cases where I had been delivered boxes and boxes of documentation. And a lot of them are depositions, other experts' depositions, the client's depositions, just everybody's deposition. And I can teach you tricks to read a deposition, a real long deposition, where you don't have to read it word for word. And I've learned that over the years. But you have to remember this: you're reading those depositions, you're getting paid your hourly fee for reading depositions. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a very slow reader.
Okay, fair enough.
But I want to make sure I read it all, But no, seriously, I mean, and a lot of your time is spent reading. I mean, I've had cases where, it take me 20 minutes to do an inspection. I know what's wrong because I've seen it 100 times, but now I got to read all these depositions. Now, like I said, there are tricks for reading depositions to where, a lot of times you're not the only party that's being sued. In other words, you go into a home and they're suing the window guy, they're suing the roofing guy, they're suing the plumber. You're only a small part of that. Well, why do you have to read, what's wrong with the plumbing? Why do you have to read what's wrong with the roof? That's not your thing. So there are ways to actually pick through a deposition and just isolate what your issue is.
Okay. I mean, you're talking about, so if you burn through the retainer and you, like you said, you're $250 an hour, that first month they have you do 11 hours worth of work. They've already given you the $2,500 up front. It's non-refundable. You're billing them for another $250. You're not requiring another retainer at that point. It's just, I've done 3-4 hours. I bill you 3-4 hours at $250. I get another check. I'm assuming that you have to have some good records somewhere, though, because, as you said, something can last 3 years. And so maybe they only burn through like 4 hours of their retainer and they're reaching out 3 years later and you still owe them unpaid time. Is there like do you have any like stipulations in your contract on the retainer? Like must be used in like 60 days, a year, whatever it's going to be?
No, but basically what you do need is, let's take an example. Attorney calls you, they discuss the case with you. And there have been cases where I've refused to be an expert on because I didn't think they were right. But that's another whole story. You get to pick and choose. And the other sounds like something I'd like to be an expert on. I'll send you an engagement, what I call an engagement letter. Sometimes it's called a retainage contract. And basically that spells out all those little items you had mentioned. It spells out your retaining fee, your hourly rate. And some people have different rates for travel. For example, my fee is basic $250 across the board. So if I'm in, Florida and I have a case in, say, Los Angeles, and I get on a plane and it takes 5 hours to get there, I'm charging him $250 an hour for that flight. So the entire 5 hours I'm sitting on the plane, I'm earning $250 per hour.
Yeah.
And some consultants and expert witnesses charge what they call portal to portal, which means they charge when they're sleeping. So if you're in LA and your deposition is until next morning and you slept 8 hours, they're charging 8 hours. I don't do that. Personally, I think that's unethical. I got to sleep anyway. It doesn't matter whether I'm sleeping in a hotel bed or at home. I'm sleeping.
Yeah.
But some people will do that.
But you're charging travel time and hours.
Yeah, because that's time I could be doing something else. So even though I'm traveling, you would travel. You would, basically your food, what you're going to, and you can either do it on a per diem basis, or you can say I need $100 a day to eat. Whatever. You spell that all out in your initial contract with them.
Okay.
They sign it, and now it becomes a legal document. And so I can honestly say I've only had one case in the entire number of years that I've been doing this where I had a hard time getting paid. Sometimes it takes a while to get paid. I mean, I deal with one insurance company that uses me constantly, and the only reason I put up with it is because they use me constantly. Sometimes I can wait 60 or 90 days to get paid, but only after the retainer has been exhausted.
Okay.
Because usually I will not start working on a case, and I spell that out in my engagement letter. My retainage retainer is $2,500. I will start the case once I receive payment.
Okay. Have you had any, like I mentioned, where like they contacted you 3 years later and they hadn't burned through the retainer, and you're like, do they have hours left? Like, I'm assuming you have some good documentation somewhere of being able to track these things down. And
usually I don't put a time limit on it. Usually if I get the $2,500 and I only put an hour into it, I'm just gonna, I'll continue that for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
But again, good record keeping, like you had mentioned. There are all kinds of software programs out there that can do it. Some of the attorney programs that are out there for attorneys work for experts as well. There are a couple companies that make them for experts. I'm still old school, even though I keep it on the computer and the files. I also have a handwritten book that I write things down in. It's just old school.
Okay. No, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's just, it's interesting that something like that can happen. And you're like you said, who are you? What case is this? What's going on? Huh? So just things coming out of nowhere at you after years.
But to answer, let me finish answering your question, because we kind of talked about it already, and that is, the kind of money you can make is really, really good. I mean, there's cases that, I've made some pretty darn good money on. One example is a case I had with an airport where, and this is kind of an interesting story. It was an airport that had all this stone in there, and I get this call, and this again was in California, and I'm out of Florida, and they said, we have this case. We want you to go do an inspection on this particular airport floor. It's cracking. So I got on a plane. I went out there and I looked at it, and I wrote my report, and I flew back. About a week later, I get a call. Well, we have another crack in the baggage claim area. And I said, okay, send me a photograph. No, we want you to fly out there and take a look at the crack. This happened continuously. I mean, this is one of those gravy jobs you pray for all the time,
Okay.
So I would literally get on a plane in Orlando. I would go to this airport. I would get off the plane. I would look at the crack. I would take a photograph, and I would wait a couple hours and get back on the plane and fly back home.
Cool. So it's like a 12-hour day at $250 an hour.
12-hour day. And this went on for 3 years. It even got to the point where, well, what we need to do is we need to fly you around the country and look at other projects that have the same material. So I got on a plane one day and went from, I'm trying to remember exactly how it went. I went from Orlando to Miami, Miami to Atlanta, Atlanta to New York, New York to Phoenix, Phoenix to Las Vegas, and Las Vegas to Burbank Airport, and the entire time getting paid, my $250 per hour. So
ridiculous.
It was one of those situations where, you have to remember that you're getting sued. The client's usually not paying your fee. The insurance company is. Mm-hmm. So, it's the money to be made is really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, no kidding. It's there. I used to think I was doing well when I was in reality television and we got half a day paid travel. Right. So, and you still got put up, you earned your own miles and all that fun stuff. But right. I was like, cool, I'm on an airplane, I'm getting paid. This is great.
Hey, right. Exactly.
But if I can make $250 an hour flying around on an airplane all day, taking pictures of cracks in floors.
Exactly.
That's a draw and a half.
Yep. And another example of that is you might get called to court. I've had court cases where I've sat in a hotel room for 8 hours and never got called. Still getting paid.
Cool.
So it's the money. It's something that if you're getting ready to retire, if you're sick of being on your hands and knees, got a bad back, it's something to really consider.
Mm-hmm. No, I believe it. It sounds like it can be very lucrative. It sounds like it can be entertaining. Educational, it'll work your brain still, which is that's what you need, right? You can't just stop doing stuff, but it's going to make you go out and still have to think at a high level and produce. And that makes it appealing. Fred, is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you about this wide range of topic that we're going over?
I think we've pretty much covered it all. Some of the things we cover in the course is, how to construct your CV. And when I say CV, guys out there might not know what that is. That's basically your resume.
Mm-hmm.
It's curriculum vitae. It's what the attorney will ask you for. Can I have a copy of your CV? We tell you how to do that. We'll teach you how to write a report. We're not going to teach you, and I want to emphasize, I'm not going to teach you your expertise, but I'm going to teach you how to take your expertise and present it properly, through expert witnessing. And the expert witnessing portion of it also applies to cases where you might not be an expert. You might get called in by an insurance company, for example. Insurance company wants to know, this wood floor is cupping. Can it be sanded and fixed, or does it need to be replaced? And a lot of times just your report and, your inspection fee is all you need, and it never goes any further than that. And that happens quite a lot with, I do a lot of work for insurance companies that way. So, I guess I'll give out the website if you go.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I mean, I'm going to say that, I think even just taking this course, right? Like we as installers and salespeople, we can go and take certification classes, continuing education classes. It sounds like going and taking this class and really honing in on how to become an expert witness from you. Even if you're not getting into being the expert witness, it sounds like it can very much up your level of confidence and the way that you learn how to communicate with people, so that even if you're going out and selling jobs for installation still, you're going to be able to go in and talk with a lot more authority, and you'll probably start writing your proposals a little bit differently. And so that you're better covered in how those contracts are written. And I think that's great, and it's any kind of investment you make in yourself with these things. Everyone always looks at the cost up front, whether it's $500, $1,000, $2,000, I know installers are always like, oh, I can't take time off. I'm going to lose $5,000 that week by spending this $2,000. And I got to buy the plane ticket, and I got to get the rental car, and I got to stop looking at what it costs you now. Look at what you're missing out on down the road. It's an investment in yourself that will pay dividends. Suck it up, spend the money. And here's the trick. Okay. I know that I have to be at Surfaces this upcoming February. In fact, I got to be there January 31st for some of the educational breakout sessions. It's in my calendar. I can't book anything on it. Now, granted, they're paying me to go and speak again, which is great, and that makes it easier to go. But I want to go regardless. And so the only way that I'm ever going to go and I'm going to accomplish these classes is if I see one far enough out in advance that I know I want. It gets blocked out on the calendar. I set the money aside. I'll buy the plane ticket and commit. If you just say, that's interesting, I'll do it, you're never going to do it. You're never going to pull the trigger, because someone's going to come along. They're going to offer you the install for that week, and you're going to take it.
Yep.
Buy the plane ticket, block out the calendar. You have to mentally commit before you ever get there. But the dividends are worth it. Go ahead.
Yep. And then, I will say that's, one of the reasons I'm offering this particular class on expert witnessing as a internet-based class, so you can do it at your own pace. Also, you mentioned the stone show. I used to do the stone and tile inspection class in Vegas during that particular show, Surfaces show, whatever they call it nowadays. But this year I'm doing it the week after. And the reason I'm doing it the week after is exactly for the reason you said. People like yourself that want to attend this class can't, because they're going to the show, they're speaking at the show, they're, they want to see a lot going on. They want to see the show. So I'm doing it after the show as well.
I don't blame you. You're already there. Enjoy your weekend off, and then hop back into something new. So, all right, Fred, how do people find you? How do they reach out to you? I know we did get a comment as we were going from my buddy Matt Garcia. He says after your first show, he reached out to you about with a question, and it was very helpful to him in a project that he was working on. So, look, Fred is out there. He is a valuable resource, and I know he's willing to talk with just about anybody. So,
absolutely.
Where do we find you? How do we reach you?
Okay, my consulting and training can be found at stoneforensics.com. What we call the e-learning classes, the ones we talked about here, can be found doing that through an organization called the Stone and Tile School. So it's the stoneandtileschool.com. And as I said during this whole presentation here, that even if you're in carpeting, wood flooring, BCT, whatever, this expert witness class will apply to you. It's just not stone. It is not has nothing to do with stone and tile,
Mhm.
actually. But just wanted to put that out there. So it's stoneforensics.com or the stoneandtileschool.com.
Okay. And hey, you got to check out the Stone and Tile show, which comes out
Yes.
generally every week. Where do we find your podcast?
Just go to Blog Talk Radio /Dr. Fred, Dr. Fred, Fred.
Okay.
Or look at my Facebook page. Just go to Stone Forensics on Facebook, and I always post on there.
Fred gets great people on there. Always very informative. It's often very technical, but
Yes.
we need that information too, right?
Yep.
So it's great information. It's very entertaining, and I won't lie, it can be dry sometimes with some of those guys talking all the technical stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
look, it's you get through it and you realize the knowledge you have now and that what you can apply, and it definitely you can up your level in the industry and the knowledge that you have when clients come to you. I answer stuff about showers and backsplashes and tile floors all the time, and it's just because I've taken the time to learn about it, or I say, look, I don't have an answer. Here's the number to my really good tile buddy. Call them up and they'll take care of you. But the more you can help a client, like in this business, you want to be the one-stop referral source. You want to know the electrician, the plumber, the realtor, the financial advisor guy, the roofer, where the good restaurants are at. You want your client to come to you as a business owner and be their one-stop shop for all things, because that means you're top of mind with them, which means that when they're out and about and they hear the word floor, they're talking about you, and it makes a huge difference. So the more knowledgeable you are, the better. All right, Fred, I appreciate you coming on. I love talking with you. I love what you're doing. And I look forward to being able to do it again. So I'm going to close this out here real quick. That's all the time we have for this week. Thanks for listening to the Floor Academy podcast. I want to encourage you to learn while you earn. So while you're on your knees, you need to be turning on this podcast, telling your friends, listening to audio books, doing other marketing and business podcasts. We don't have time to go to college per se, so you got to do it during the day while we're doing our menial tasks that are repetitive and often like mind-numbingly boring. But you can spice it up, and if you only get 10% of what you listen to and take away from that stuff, you're going to be way further ahead of your competition. You make sure to check out the website, flooracademypod.com. You can help support our Patreon over there. There's a link. $5 a month goes a long way to helping this content to continue to be produced. Or you can go to the shop, check out our merchandise. We got hoodies, t-shirts, all kinds of fun stuff. Don't forget about the group on Facebook. Just search for Floor Academy. You can keep the conversations going over there. And since I've switched to video, all of the episodes are live streamed way before they're ever going to be released in podcast format. This week there's been 3 in the past 2 or 3 days, I think. So, I'm busy doing it, and then you won't see me for a minute, and I'll come back and you'll get a bunch more live streams. So I want to thank everybody for listening, and we will be back next week. Flooring Domain is an award-winning online flooring directory and service marketplace that helps you find more customers, grow your online presence and reputation or your brand. Whether you are a carpet store or flooring installer, perhaps a tile contractor, there are jobs for everyone with a daily stream of customers visiting Flooring Domain and looking for experts like you. Flooring Domain offers a free listing option that allows you to find customer leads. You can set up a free account at Flooring Domain by visiting flooringdomain.us. Have you ever tried to install LVP on steps only to struggle with the solution for the stair nose? Introducing Snap Caps by SnapTech. You simply send SnapTech the exact LVP your customer selects, and they'll turn it into a perfectly matched stair nose that clicks flush into the tread plank for a simple and reliable solution. Visit www.snaptech.biz to learn more or order. All right, folks, I appreciate you listening. Once again, let a friend know and spread the word. Thanks.